Well, hello there. I'm the Reasonable Clerith, and tonight's topic is one of the most divisive FF7 topics going. Speak to people on X or Reddit, and most will answer quickly and firmly. The Re-Trilogy must have a definitive ending. It must decide whether it is a faithful remake or a sequel. It must resolve the long-standing shipping debate. It must finally conclude the arc of Sephiroth. And it absolutely most positively must not expand into yet more spin-offs and transmedia experiments. But beneath these declarations lies something simpler. When fans say definitive ending, what they actually mean is the ending they want. The plot direction they believe in, the ship they support, the interpretation they've always held onto. The reality is this: if Square Enix closes the story too tightly, excluding all other interpretations, a significant portion of the fan base will feel alienated. And alienation on that scale is damaging, not only to the trilogy itself, but to Square Enix's relationship with its audience at a time where they really need to bolster trust. Yes, today we are talking about multiple or dynamic endings, and why I have the sneakiest of feelings we're going to see them in part 3. Oh god, I can only imagine what my ratio is going to look like for this one. Oh, and by the way, this is not a shipping vid, we're really not talking about romances here. The Great Audience Divide. On one side are the OG purists, players who regard the 1997 original as a blueprint not to be altered. They want the same pacing, the same beats, and the same tragedy that gave the original its enduring power. Presumably they also want that same nostalgic feeling of their mother's disapproving gaze, but I guess they only need to turn round to experience that. Jokes! On the other side are the Defy Fate advocates, players who embraced the ending of Remake with its overt suggestion of change. They welcome departures from the script and want a bold reinterpretation of familiar events. Both groups matter. Losing one would not simply be a creative risk, it would be a financial one. This trilogy is not an art house project, it's the centerpiece of Square Enix's catalogue, especially with failures elsewhere. The third part especially has immense stakes. This isn't just about immediate sales, it's about upsell, cross-sell, and maybe even the elusive trust. That mystical substance Square Enix has been trying to win back ever since their previous games, Corridor Simulator 09, Empty Space Simulator 23, and to a lesser extent Gay Boy Band Road Trip Edition, failed to bring in the numbers they were expected to. Promises to keep. In a game featuring a song called No Promises to Keep, Square Enix has made 2 promises to its players. That it has to keep, ironically. To the purists, reassurance that all core events will remain intact, including the ending. Developer interviews have often stressed fidelity, repeatedly referencing Advent Children as a touchstone. Kitase has suggested a more optimistic tone at times, but overall the messaging has been conservative with regards to deviation from the OG. To the Fate Defiers, promises of surprise and deviation. The marketing and the game itself leans into this. Red 13's words during the climax of Remake, different in English and Japanese, but consistent in implication, tell the player that repeating the key beats from the OG constitutes a failure. Add to this the changes we have already seen: partial evacuation of Sector 7, Cloud's expanded knowledge, Aerith's uncertain fate. These are not minor adjustments. Each of these have a valid view. The purists can say that all along the devs have hinted at this from the very start, despite sometimes strange wording or the odd off-script Kitase murmurings. But otherwise, the devs have been fairly consistent, haven't they? Then on the side of the Fate Defiers, they feel that so much has already been talked about, foreshadowed, teased. So many assets designed specifically to tell the story of these other worlds, of other potential outcomes. They'll feel betrayed that all of this narrative promise is so much smoke and mirrors. Thus, 2 promises, 2 audiences, 1 trilogy and millions of hearts to break. It's less of a plan and more of an existential crisis between SE and their core audiences. Multiple endings. Now, what the higher echelons of SE will want is to maximise lifetime value of their players. That is, to keep them sweet and keep them playing and paying. The best way to do this is, rather sadly, give them what they want. They will want both of these audiences and whatever other commercial cohort they've identified, finishing the game and enjoying it. So much so that they buy multiple copies on multiple devices. Not only that, but they continue to buy merch, to buy future games, to be brand ambassadors. All of this is upside and reflects directly on share price and the future viability of the business. So, how do SE go about making everyone relatively happy? There are 2 ways to approach this should they wish to adhere to both of these promises and keep everyone smiling. Multiple endings or layered interpretation. Despite vocal objections like the one you're probably yelling at the screen right now, during my time in the video games industry, I've seen numerous robust research studies that show that most players do in fact appreciate multiple endings. Consider the success of Witcher 3, Baldur's Gate 3, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, maybe it's just a 3 thing, Silent Hill 2, Life is Strange, Liza P, Dying Light 2, The Dark Pictures Anthology, Pathfinder, Disco Elysium, Detroit Become Human, Dragon Age. These games show that branching outcomes deepen engagement, extend playtime and strengthen emotional investment for a number of players. But TRC, Final Fantasy VII isn't a choose-your-own adventure. Well, to that I say a couple of things. Firstly, how do you get into my head and why do you keep asking me to set fire to things? Secondly, Bioshock, Nier, Spec Ops The Line, Chrono Trigger, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, these are all fairly linear stories that also have differing endings, sometimes based on some pretty basic mechanics. FF7 wouldn't be somehow breaking a mystic gaming law by having this divergence come at the end of the story. Also, just keep in mind that multiple endings can be subtle. For example, a single overarching conclusion but with added elements shaped by choices or conditions met. These can create different nuances and flavours despite retaining the overall creative direction, and still be classed as a multiple ending. More specifically, a modular ending. Square Enix has already done this. Final Fantasy X2 had a branching ending with variations, ranging from bittersweet to complete reunion. If the company could manage that while dressing Yuna in pop star spandex, surely they could manage something here. What players say versus what they desire. There is often a gap between what players say they want and what they respond to emotionally. I've seen this happen in biometric testing where we see the difference between implicit and explicit reactions. No, not explicit like that. Think of it more like your subconscious desires versus your stated and more rational responses. We see it with some die-hard OG fans and the Tifa kiss. On the one hand, these players actively lobby for things to remain as per the OG. On the other, we have them celebrating the Tifa kiss despite it completely altering the nature of the Tifa romance. It's not just extra, it changes the narrative experience considerably. In the OG at this point, Tifa and Cloud's relationship was still awkward, unknown. It needed the livestream to remedy this, acting as the romantic Rubicon. It's one of the biggest narrative changes we've seen so far, yet people overlook this and move the goalposts of what is acceptable. Why? Because players want their dreams realised far more than they want their ethical stances preserved. Put simply, principles are lovely until they get in the way of wish fulfillment. And it would be exactly the same for any other audience group, not just Tifa fans. The arguments will continue. A common objection is that multiple endings will only fuel endless debate about what is canon, to which the answer is yes, obviously. But let's be realistic. Final Fantasy debates will continue until the heat death of the universe. Even then, the last dying embers of the last dying star will probably flicker in Morse code. The more important question is this. Is it better for two groups to continue arguing over the nuances of canon, but be happy with their version of events, or for one group to feel completely excluded and, quite frankly, angry? You think the arguments on X are bad now? Imagine what they would be if, after 30 years, one audience's view is completely and utterly invalidated. Interpretation as an alternative. There is also another path, interpretation. Square Enix has long leaned on ambiguity as a narrative device, and the multiverse structure provides a natural way to continue this. The final act could suggest the coexistence of multiple outcomes, one aligning with the OG, another diverging, perhaps others entirely new. Each could be framed as valid within its own world. The same applies to character fates. Zack, Aerith, even the romantic pairings could be reflected across different realities, leaving space for all interpretations. This approach avoids a definitive answer or diluting the narrative experience through choice, though it still allows fans to find their preferred vision within the text. But sometimes it fails to satisfy anyone other than those completely at ease with such a narrative device. US audiences, in particular, tend to hate anything that relies on interpretation and will often be the first to bring up what constitutes canon. With Nomura overseeing the final section, a master of such wibbly-wobbly storytelling, it's an approach that seems especially likely. And the more I hear Katase's confidence that players will be happy with the conclusion, the more I think one of these multifaceted approaches will be making its way to a PlayStation, PC, Switch 2, Xbox near you. Conclusion. Should the Re-Trilogy pursue multiple endings and/or interpretation? Despite what I've said today, I really don't mind. I'm not particularly for multiple endings, but I am for fans being able to glean an ending they identify with. Perhaps not completely, but to the extent it doesn't invalidate what they played so far. As an employee of the video games industry, I want to see happy, engaged players, and the cause of video games furthered, even if it is a rival. If Square Enix wishes to honour its promises, meet its financial goals, and preserve its bond with its audience, the path is clear. Allow multiplicity. Multiple endings, or at least multiple interpretations, give each audience a way to see themselves reflected in the work. And whilst you may think you want a definitive ending, I challenge you to think on this. How would you react if the ending you got was the opposite of what you've always hoped for? Would you take it on the chin? Would you brush it off? Would you act rationally? I didn't think so. Square Enix can protect both the legacy of the original and the innovation of the remake. After decades of waiting, the fans deserve nothing less. Even then, it's a hugely difficult brief. But let's face it, Final Fantasy VII has always been about impossible odds. Maybe satisfying its fans is its biggest boss battle yet.